Hello, and welcome to our Indie Week panel on streaming rates and predictions. As a reminder to everyone watching and taking part in this panel, we will only be discussing public deal terms in today's conversation. My name is Hannah Silk Champagne. I'm a product manager at NinjaTune. And today I'm joined by Joe Jenkins and Katie Alberts. Katie, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Katie. I serve as the head of operations for Reach Records. So I oversee distribution, our deals with DSPs, sync, digital marketing, and finance. I've been at Reach for 8 years now. And a little bit about our label as well. The label was started 17 years ago. We're primarily hip hop focused, but we do have dabble in Latin, pop, some other genres there too. We're based in Atlanta, Georgia. We have about 15 employees, so we're small to medium-sized independent. And we're also artist-owned. So Lecrae, who's our largest artist, is also president of the label. So.
Awesome. And Joe, you want to go ahead?
Hi, my name is Joe Jenkins. I'm Director of Digital and Sales at A2IM. We work with a lot of third-party labels, as well as the Death Row catalog, Dual Tone, Last Gang, RBC. So, you know, from Lumineers all the way to Chief Keef, we work with it. As well as I dabble a lot with a little bit of project management with some of the artists, but that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Well, let's get started. So it's kind of a given that streaming dominates the music industry these days, and streaming rates are obviously so key to that. Are you seeing more labels and artists putting a focus on and analyzing where streaming rates are going these days?
I don't know if you want to go, if you want me to.
Go ahead, Katie. I mean, yeah, I didn't want to jump over you, but yeah, please.
No, you're good. Yeah, I mean, I think that in the transition from being really download focused to streaming, there's been a lot of analysis done on streaming rates. And I think, to clarify, most deals are not done on a per stream rate, they're revenue share. So basically what that means is all the revenue that comes in is compiled. And then it's the denominator is the number of streams that occurred. So in deals, you negotiate how much of that pot is attributable, and it's divided by number of streams. So that's the typical format of payout. There are some other deals that are being experimented with, like user-centric payments, which I think are really interesting. But yeah, there's definitely a lot more analysis going on. And I also feel like there's a trend towards more transparency as well. So for the independent, that's always a good thing to level the playing field there.
Definitely from our side, there is a focus on the streaming rates, depending on who you ask. You know, a lot of people get caught up seeing the numbers at Spotify because that's out there, and they see that out there, and they want to see the numbers big. But depending on where those streams are coming from, that doesn't necessarily pay out. If you ask, another artist that say international, their focus is on Pandora and what they're able to do within XM Series and stuff like that, because they know that the payout can be very good for them over there. It's really just about who you ask. It varies depending on the artist, what their mind state is. That's really what it is.
Yeah. So depending on sort of these various factors that you're talking about and artist interest in it, how are you kind of working these, working these into release strategies, whether it's an artist wanting to focus on a particular space or wanting to, like you're mentioning Pandora and Sirius, and so what does that look like in the scope of a campaign?
I mean, say an artist is getting a lot of looks from Pandora XM Series, where they're actually getting added at XM Series and stuff like that. We definitely try to make sure that we make them available for things like that. We try to make sure that we over deliver to XM Series and outlets like that. Or if it's Tidal, there's things that we can do within there that we try to make sure that within their ecosystem that we deliver the videos there, that we engage with them and try to just you know, a saying that my uncle always said, love those that love you. So whatever the outlet is, you just try to maximize what you're doing with them, just because we know it's going to bleed over to the other outlets just the same.
Mm-hmm.
So for myself, or for Reach, I feel like there's a lot of similarity there. Where is the artist getting love shown from? But I also think that it's kind of created like a competitive landscape with smart URLs, link fires, etc. And there can sometimes be a good amount of competition between the DSPs of where they're placed within that link. And I think it's been really cool to see DSPs respond with incentives or ancillary aspects of it to promote you to put their DSP in a higher position. For example, I believe Apple Music can unlock some additional data by being higher up on Linkfire. And I know there's also affiliate link programs and things like that to specifically point to certain DSPs. So I'd say it definitely like affects where we're putting it within links. But yeah, it's also cool to see that DSP competition.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep. And so to that end, you know, if maybe you're finding that an artist is, you know, performing well somewhere, but it's kind of a lower rate space, or maybe not hitting with some of the spaces that you might want based on that, do you tend to, you know, do more spends on pushing towards those, move the, you know, link up in the link fire, or do you kind of, you know, take what you're getting and run with it?
We definitely, sorry.
No, go ahead, Katie. Please go ahead, Katie. I'm sorry.
We definitely, it's not all just about the direct revenue coming from that territory. We kind of take a layered approach to it. So if there's traction happening in a country, it really doesn't matter to us what the streaming rate is. We're like, let's put gasoline on the fire there, for example. We do the majority of our business in the US, but we've had some cool little experiments and streaming tractions going in other territories. There's one particular song of ours that's been taking off in Brazil. And it's the oddest thing, because when we tracked it back to where did this originate from, it was a UGC video on Instagram of somebody making an omelet, which is completely irrelevant to what the song is about. But for some reason, that's inspiring lots of other people to make UGC videos, and it's, you know, charting in Brazil on Shazam and all those types of things. So we see that happen, and nobody's looking up the streaming rate. We're saying, how can we get more Brazil fans? Because that translates not just for payouts, but it's about exposure and about press and about neighboring territories and expanding there. And it's the same thing too for, you know, when we look at artists, if they're in other territories, it's not just about what the rate is in that territory, it's about what's the future of the industry there too. Is Spotify planning to move into this territory? How can we build relationships there?
One of the artists that I worked with in past was A La Las, and initially on their first album, a lot of their streams were coming from Mexico and Mexico City specifically, when they had never even been to Mexico, you know. But at the same time, we used that data and just used that energy that was coming from that territory and bartered it against other territories, other DSPs, other data that we could, you know, whether it be within Apple, whether it be within Spotify, or just all of these different outlets, you know. Any traction that we get, we have to use whatever we can to make sure that it's used for their benefit. So like, to me, it doesn't matter if it's Brazil, if it's Mexico, if it's, you know, somewhere in Japan, Korea. All these numbers help us in what we're trying to get at the end of the day, and that's the best for our artists.
You know, speaking of other territories, you know, when, like you were saying, Katie, that, you know, there's a lot of growth into new territories, and do you ever, you know, sometimes you're saying you'll have a song kind of randomly hit in a certain space, but are you looking now like at rosters and trying to look to, you know, add more localized content, do anything in particular to kind of cater to those markets, or is, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been really interested in the African territory, and Spotify's not in all of those markets, nor are all the predominant US focused DSPs there. But there's also local DSPs there. And so that's an important part of our strategy, is to locate those local DSPs, build relationships there, do deals with them. In particular, we work with a party in South Korea to distribute to like 8 local DSPs there. And you know, it might not be a huge revenue source for us, but it's a constant drip and a build. And we've been working with this company for maybe 2 years, and now we just got a big sync through them. And I'm like, so even though we might not have had the biggest per stream rate or drip, the ecosystem created a stream of revenue that translated.
That was always a struggle for us with a lot of our, Afrobeat or electronic artists from Africa or whatever, where Spotify wasn't in the territory, but their songs would be massive. So for them, they would only see Apple as the outlet that they would want to cater to. Luckily now that Spotify has kind of gained a little bit more traction in the game within the continent, it definitely helps in terms of just like seeing where things are happening and just actually seeing that, this isn't a blip on the radar. Our artists are really doing really well out there, and just whatever we can do to keep that going is just great.
Yeah. With what are you seeing what do you think are some of the more important emerging territories, as it were, whether it's, the knock-on effect they might have in surrounding areas or just with opportunities?
I think Brazil continues to be a hot market. I'm always astonished with the stats that come out of Brazil, and I'm always like, in non-COVID times, we need to be touring, we need to be working that market as much as we can. I also think Nigeria is a really hot market for Afrobeats in particular. Our A&R is from Liberia, and he loves Afrobeats, and he's always educating us on what's happening in the market. And I've spoken with some people on the ground that know way more and way better than I do about the Nigerian market, and it's just really interesting because Spotify just expanded into Nigeria, but in terms of like where they've focused their efforts on before then, like the African diaspora was super important in terms of revenue, but the artists locally are using other forms of income besides streaming from Nigeria, like brand sponsorships, particularly with like telco companies, to get streams of revenue until that streaming starts to take off locally.
Asian markets, whether it be South Korea, Malaysia, Thailand, all of these different markets, even Africa, respective to Nigeria, Ghana, you have to approach each of these markets as their own special way and be respected to just the culture as well within those markets as well, because it's just something that may be popping in Nigeria may not translate within Ghana, or something within South Korea doesn't translate to Japan. So it's just like we have to take a pretty fine approach when we do these things, because it's just, it's very easy to just go into something and just, brush over it and think that, oh, because we have something that's going on in Japan, that it's going to translate into South Korea. It doesn't work that way. And that's one thing that I would say, is just being respectful to each of these regions, and trying to make sure that like whatever you do there it fits and it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would agree completely and wholeheartedly with what Joe just said. I think it's super important to talk to the people that have had experience in music there for the past 10, 15 years before we come in and just start imparting all our ideas of how the music industry will work there. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I'm sure that with, like you're saying, there are kind of territory specific DSPs, maybe even country specific. I'm sure that, yeah, kind of being in touch, like you were saying, with people on the ground at those is super helpful. Are there any of the, what we might here consider smaller DSPs, but really they might be huge in a different market? Are there any that you've seen take off and have their rates grow a little bit more? Maybe they started out kind of small, but they've been a worthwhile investment that people might want to take a look at?
I wouldn't say that they're small, but I definitely love the fact that Deezer is just a huge supporter of anything and everything that we do in a lot of different territories. They get it, and they have a really strong editorial team that is engaged and knows what they're talking about. They're not small either, but Tidal, they have a very strong international team that, I can't go on Instagram without getting Tidal Spain or just all these other different territories, barraging me with their new playlists or different things that they're incorporating that, it's something to be said when you have a strong editorial team in the market, and it moves the needle when you engage with these different territories within those DSPs.
Yeah.
This is a little tangential, but it reminds me of one specific DSP that's not very mainstream, but is actually a pretty big source of revenue for us. And in terms of like where they fall on our top sources, is always like would surprise people. It's JPay. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that platform before.
Yes,
but
we love JPay.
Love JPay. Absolutely love JPay.
Yeah. Tell me a little more.
So
okay.
yeah, they distribute to the prison system in the United States. They're not in every prison, but they're in a good amount of prisons. And Reach Records, we do a lot of work within the prison system. Specifically, Lecrae has been investing over like the past 10 years with just a lot of shows, a lot of speaking with inmates and developing those relationships. And so it's really cool to have a way to distribute the music within the prison system. And they're actually based on downloads, not streams. So there you see more money per interaction because it's download. And yeah, we've just had a really, really pleasant experience working with them. I'm curious, Joe, to hear about your experience too.
Well, this is I'm about to go on a rant, but JPay became, for me, we wanted to get the death row catalog within the prison system. And so like I spent the longest time trying to configure cassettes because I thought that was the only way to get the music in within the prison system was cassettes. But it was like, no, there's JPay, they have tablets. Let's get it up there and get it figured out, because people need to hear the Chronic. They need to hear Doggy Style. They need, they need Tupac. So it was just a really good way to really engage with, with the inmates and just prison system, and really thankful that they're there.
Yeah, wow, that's super interesting. I suppose that's probably, I'm wondering if you kind of do any marketing within that kind of space, or if there are other spaces you can think of that are sort of a, not in the like passive listening sense, but the kind of passive audience sense where there might be, just sort of a natural consumption happening.
Yeah, well, we do prison shows, so that's definitely one thing. But it's an app, it's an interface, so there are like editorial features where you can get placements and such within the platform that advertise the new release. So that's definitely something that we like to engage over, is how can we get the best editorial placements. And then particularly for the last album that Lecrae put out, which was entitled Restoration, he had a really big passion for serving the overlooked. And so, inmates a lot of times get music last. And so he kind of wanted to flip that on his head and give it to him first. So we actually released the album in the prison system first before it was available to the public, to give them, the first experience with the music. So, it's something that's happening organically within the prison system to develop those fans and that relationship and give them something special. And then, but nobody else really knows about it. We just do that kind of, within the system.
Yeah.
Applaud y'all for that. That's great.
Yeah, we should have a whole panel on that.
Yeah.
Truly, but to kind of pivot back a little bit more into the rates end of things, do you have any examples of where you've kind of seen rates decline, something that, aside from perhaps downloads, but in the streaming space, where things have declined and kind of caused a pivot, or that have, you've largely just stopped investing in a space?
I mean, there have been some things that have happened recently. We could all just see in the news that like there are some things happening within a couple of DSPs that the rates have declined, but we haven't really pivoted away from that just because it's it's out there. People look at it. That's the DSP that everybody looks at as far as like how many streams are they getting. It's just more so that we try to put more of a focus on some of the other things that we can do, whether it be merch, whether it be this, just kind of supplement all the energy that we put there within these certain DSPs that maybe the rate has gone down. What other things can we uncover that can help our artists actually drive revenue for them? So we started creating a lot more, D2C opportunities for our artists, developing stores, little pop-ups online and stuff like that. The money that's generated there has actually been amazing, and it's pretty much something that's going to take over a lot of our time, to be honest with you, for the foreseeable future, is actually diving into that a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know that it would be rates declining in particular so much that we've like noticed and pivoted strategy. I'd say it's more so where are the fans at and where can we engage the most, and as new platforms become more viable and better ways to engage with, we end up spending more of our time promoting there. For example, Instagram hasn't had music for too long, and Instagram Reels hasn't been around for forever either. And we had a song this year really pop off on Instagram Reels. So it was within the top 3 songs on Instagram for 9 weeks, and it peaked at #1. And like we just couldn't stop the momentum of UGC content, not that we wanted to, but it was just super organic. And so whereas we may have spent our time working that song on other DSPs a lot, suddenly we're having whole brainstorming sessions about how can we engage Instagram and Reels and continue to put fuel to this UGC wave that's happening here.
We've literally had whole campaigns based around what you just said with Reels and stuff, where we premiered a Juicy J video with Facebook. We had Seven Streeter, she did a whole campaign related to her song Guilty via Reels and Facebook, and it's just one of those things that, I feel like with a lot of these other outlets coming into the music space and actually engaging and helping us make money, it's bringing a lot of parity and actually putting a lot more pressure on some of the other outlets to step it up in terms of what they do with us, because if they don't, there's now other outlets that are very aggressively reaching out to us, trying to do these things that they were the only game in town to do before. But now it's like, you know what? I'm gonna take my marbles and go play over here now.
Yeah. And on that note with Instagram Reels too, that's a really good example of something that we have seen translate to streams as well. So, we might have had like a big sync usage and we see like a 10% spike on Spotify and Apple and our major DSPs. But with UGC content, we've come to note our key takeaway is that it's quantity over quality. We've had top 10 most followed Instagrammers post with our music, and they're good posts, like they tag the song and everything, like, and we see just 5-10% increases. But when we get this swell of UGC content, that's when we see 300% increases. And so, yeah, that's just become an important way traction within the platform, but also to see it translate. Because we see those increases on Spotify, on Apple, on YouTube. We see them across all platforms then.
So would you say that if you are working with artists who are maybe a bit averse to streaming, whether it's due to rates or just not a space that they're interested in, or would you say it's become quite a bit easier to kind of find alternative ways to feed them back to that indirectly? Or are you finding that, you know, you were talking about D2C, that maybe that's just something that is going to be viable for artists to focus on?
Prime example, this week, an artist that I work with, he dropped a single exclusively on Bandcamp, and he wasn't even thinking about putting it up on DSPs because he just wasn't interested in it, you know. And me, I want him to put the song up on DSPs just because I know he's a prominent artist. He's going to get a lot of streams. It's going to look great, whatever. But for his sake, he wasn't interested at all. So we went to Bandcamp and just brought the conversation back up with them, and they're offering so many great things within their ecosystem of things that they can do, whether it be a vinyl program where his fans are able to buy vinyl off of this single that he put out, or a Bandcamp live session where they're selling tickets so the fans can actually support him and watch a live stream show and buy merch and other things like that. That it was kind of hard for me to argue with him once we had the real conversation with the Bandcamp team. There's a lot of things like that popping up that, you know, there's not one way to do things anymore. So it's just, you know, it's yeah, the world is their oyster. It's just a matter of like actually getting in there and rolling up your sleeves and actually trying to figure out which way you want to go about these things.
Yeah, I haven't had a whole ton of experience with anybody being averse, any of our artists being averse to streaming. I'd say it's usually more the opposite pressure. They want to be the first on every new platform and on every new format. And that's our job. That's our, you know, our challenge to make sure that the first time that a new format comes out, or the first time that something becomes available, that we're a part of that release. Because it's the worst thing to get hit up and be like, why aren't we a part of this? Yeah, so I'd say it's more the opposite for us. They're thirsty for new formats and new ways to engage streaming.
Do you have any, I guess you've talked about so many awesome kind of initiatives and campaigns that you've done in various spaces. Do you have any tips for labels who are, you know, either looking to engage in different streaming platforms besides the sort of big three, or are looking to kind of predict where, you know, whether it's where rates are going or where listeners are going? General knowledge you could impart?
I'm gonna let you go first on this one, Katie.
I think I need some clarification. Are you saying like other DSPs to engage with?
Yeah, sorry if that was too general. I think just, you know, good ways that you're finding to project where listeners might be going or where audiences are going to be engaging that can divert back to streaming.
Okay. I guess my tip would be any data that you're able to find, be on it. So like any ways that you can track usage or track streams to see traction grow will help you to respond faster. And I might be beating this a bit too much, but Instagram Reels has just continued to be like, it actually correlates to streams for us. And so when you're planning those campaigns, making them authentic and making them specific to the artist, so that, for example, that song that was in the top 3 for 9 weeks, one of the campaigns that we did in response to that was we made a storytime video where the artist talked about like how he made it, and it was super funny about eating pizza while he was making the song, and then all the crazy people that have posted it. And he said, you know, this song's on track to go gold with no major support, no radio, nothing. And that's because of you guys, the fans. So I want to see the videos that you're making, and one of you guys I'm going to give a gold plaque to when it goes gold. And that was the most successful campaign that we ran. It wasn't the big posts from the top 10 Instagrammers. It wasn't like that was the most engaged with and vital part of the UGC campaign, was something that came from the artist in particular, and showed his perspective, wasn't super fabricated, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just to play off of what Katie said, I would just say to the artist, just be authentic to yourself and to your audience. That's going to be the biggest thing, no matter what the platform is that you engage with. An example of that is we have the artist Keys and Crates, and they just joined TikTok. And, we're having full-on meetings of just like, what do we do for TikTok? How do we approach this? And, in the middle of the meeting, I was just like, what, just be authentic, be yourselves. You don't have to do a dance challenge to make yourselves cool on there. Just be yourselves. The next day, they posted the most snarky video that they ever could on TikTok, but their fans engaged with it because they were just like, they loved it, because they're just like, yeah, that's how you need to be, and because it was just them, and you could tell people were just resharing it and loving it, just because it was just like, that's who they are. Whatever the outlet is, just really lean into that and do what you do best. Just be yourselves. It'll show through whatever outlet it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Hitting on that fan engagement, super important. I guess to kind of close this out, what do you have any kind of, I guess the question is, what do you think the future holds? Where do you think things are heading, both to do with rates, if people are going to be focusing on that, if it's going to be about, tapping into new markets? What are you kind of seeing as the most important things over the next couple of years for your labels and artists?
Yeah, I think the trend towards transparency with deals. One of the things I didn't mention before is I also serve as a board member of Merlin. And for those that don't know, Merlin represents independent rights to make deals with DSPs. So they use the collective weight, instead of me going in with my small catalog, they use the collective weight of 15% of the industry to get the best rates possible for labels and distributors. And so I think they've done an amazing job in the last 10, 15 years of flipping the narrative there, and giving independents access to best in class and top deal terms that weren't previously accessible. And so I see that really benefiting independents, and that trend continuing to level the playing field so that your average creator doesn't have to be signed to a huge major in order to get their music out successfully to the world. Other trends, I would say, I just continue to see the impact of socials and the integration with music. I think, a couple of years ago it was a dabbling thing, and it seems to be picking up traction to me a lot. So I anticipate that music will become a more integral source or component of socials in the future.
I'm looking at like consolidation as a big impact in terms of what things are going on, like Facebook and Instagram just kind of getting in the game of music. Amazon having Twitch, them figuring out how they work together as far as the different things that they're planning. Tidal now working with Square and Twitter. I think a lot of these outlets are going to be a lot more aggressive in terms of the different deals, rates, and other opportunities that they're going to offer up to artists and labels. That I think it's a good time for artists, and just hold on to your catalog and just work it the best way you can within whatever these outlets that's raising their hands and wants to support you, and expect a lot of good things from these different things that are coming up ahead, though.
Yeah, Absolutely. Are there any areas that you feel like we might have missed or not touched on? Anything else you two would like to bring up and impart on us?
I mean, I'm just happy we talked about JPay at this point.
Me too.
You know, like, so I'm hoping somebody takes that and runs with it, but you know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
absolutely. I'm glad I was able to discover something new today as well. Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for talking with us. And we'll look out for questions and comments.
Hey, appreciate y'all. This was fun.
Thank you, Hannah.
Yeah. Thanks to A2IM.